The issue of boys and young men and how they see themselves is become an increasingly frequent story in media outlets. Alpha Tau Omega, from its formation, including its heritage and identifying eternal and immutable principles, speaks to a lot of the issues that young men, all men actually, are facing. And as Alpha Tau Omega continues to be relevant to its members, Dave Rodriguez has been a key component in helping us develop programs that we believe speak to young men and to their futures. Dave joins us today for a conversation. So, with folks that have never heard of Men of Destiny, I can talk about how we got there, but it's more interesting from your perspective, not only if you talk about how ATO got to that point, but as you've now facilitated that with hundreds, probably thousands of undergraduates at this point, sort of your impressions in what you're seeing that program doing and what you would hope it would do.
Yeah, when we launched Men of Destiny, we launched it because we believe that young men are at a place in their life where questions of like, why am I here? Or what is my calling? What is my purpose? Is important to them. In some cases, many cases, that's why they're in college. They're trying to figure out why I'm here and how am I going to frame my educational life so that my career life or purpose is formed. And so that's really what Men of Destiny helps young men do, is grapple with that purpose. I've now done it. I think it's in the thousands now of our undergrads that we've taken through Men of Destiny, either at major conference events and I've been on a lot of chapters too. And the response is almost always the same. There's a handful of guys that are just overwhelmingly grateful. There's a bunch of guys that are very interested. There's some guys that are mildly interested and other guys who are not ready to talk about that. But the general reaction is, thank you. This is important to me. But to your earlier point, we had no idea at the point, or maybe we did intuitively, had an idea that what we were touching on, this issue of a man's identity, which is what Men of Destiny helps with, we had no idea that would come to the forefront. And with the current events and I would say, unrest and question and processing that is going on, men are asking that question. And Men of Destiny helps answer the question, who are you? And just one side note, we know the young men really want to know, do I matter? Is there something heroic about me? And Men of Destiny helps identify the heroic in a man.
So someone listening would say, how can an 18 to 24-year-old start really plotting his destiny when he really hasn't even started his adult life?
Yeah, it's a great question. And destiny, maybe not a young undergrad is not going to be able to understand his destiny, but he can understand his purpose and start down the road of living with a sense of purpose, with a sense of calling, with a sense of this is why I'm here. And as they then grow and they continue to pursue that purpose, and they get to be more like my age, it starts to feel like a destiny. But it can start where they are thinking more purposeful.
Yeah, so some stories of undergraduates that have come up to you or stories that you've heard of men going through this process, just in terms of the impact on them.
Yeah. So two stories that really caught my attention. One at LSU, there was a young man that as we were going through the workshop, his reaction was, it was like, say something, he had his arms folded and he was like, and somehow I engaged him in a conversation. He said, look, I'm just in college to make money. I think he said something like that. Okay, fine. Well, later, I can't remember if it was in a break or after the whole thing was over, he came up to me and actually was teared up. And he said to me in essence, I got it. I mean, halfway through the workshop, I got it. And he said, here's my story. I'm in the United States. He was from South America. I'm in the United States because my grandmother sacrificed just about everything so that I could come and get an education in the United States. And he said, I realized how much she sacrificed financially for me just to make sure I'm here. And he said, I want to be like my grandma. And he said, make no question about it. I do want to make money. He said, but I want my purpose to be more, how can I help people like my grandma helped me? So that's one story where he saw beyond what we would call the American dream to something that is deeper. Another, this was at Virginia Tech doing the workshop, and I asked, we came to the end of the workshop, and I guess in the middle of the workshop, I asked, do any of you see a tie between your life story and what you think is your calling? And one guy raised his hand right away, and he said, yeah. He said, I grew up in a loving home, a close-knit family. We just loved each other, and being home was really important because we were together, and it was so formative in my life. And he said, so I'm studying, this was interesting, I'm studying to be an architect because I want to design houses that will become homes. That was literally what he said. I want to design houses, though. And what he's thinking about homes is a home that would be that kind of loving center of a family. I thought that was profound for a 20-something young man. Right. So those are two stories.
Right. I think what undergraduates don't understand, probably because it's impossible, it's like a fish trying to understand water, is that going through this program is rare, certainly for someone at their age, but rare for anybody to go through, right? And so when you've done this program with the foundation board, the fraternity board, alumni, reactions to that.
Yeah, I've done it for corporations. I've done it for NFL football players. I've done it for soccer moms, and I've done it for retirees. And the same reaction in general comes from just about everybody. And here's why. And the reaction is gratitude, deep interest, many times tears. I'm not going to lie. There are a lot of people get emotional in this process because what we believe through Men of Destiny is this calling or this purpose is the most ancient thing about you. It was some people would say it was God placed in him. Some people would say it's fate, but it existed before you did. And so it's the most ancient thing about you, this calling. It's also the most eternal thing about you because when you operate in your calling, you leave a legacy, and that legacy continues to pass down from generation to generation. So when you get a hold of that and you start thinking about that, all of a sudden it's like, holy cow, this is important. And so just about everyone reacts the same way with this sense of wonder and appreciation.
So Men of Destiny really is something that, as you just mentioned, you've done this for a lot of other people, not ATO.
Right.
And yet, and not called Men of Destiny, right?
Right.
ATO sort of termed that when you came into ATO. So for people that don't know, which is probably most of our listeners, describe how you got connected to ATO, and I'll start the story.
Yeah. Okay. Because it starts with you.
Dave was my pastor for 25 years at a church in suburban Indianapolis. And we knew each other, but weren't really friends. It was a large church, so I was one of many. And one Sunday, Dave announced his retirement was going to be coming up in a couple of years. And something just told me at the time, you need to have breakfast with Dave after his retirement and find out what he's going to be doing in retirement. And so we did. And we had a breakfast, and I explained to him about ATO. And how, as he was a leader of a large organization that had volunteers and staff and was quite successful in leading that. And in ATO, we have volunteers and staff, and was interested in sort of pushing more into some faith-oriented kinds of things. And we just started a conversation. So you can pick it up from there.
Well, and I was leaving this role of pastor, which I've over 40 years, and I wasn't retiring. I didn't want to retire. I wanted to engage with an organization or people because of this in the back of my mind, this whole idea of helping people figure out purpose. And that has been the driving calling on my life. And so when we met, I thought, oh, this would be, I've never had connection with a fraternity. I went to University of Pittsburgh, and then I went to seminary and did not have a fraternity connection, but I was intrigued. But when I started meeting with you and with your lead team, and we started having these conversations about purpose and calling, I think one day I said, well, why don't I just walk you guys through this process, essentially Men of Destiny, before we branded it that. I think it was a helpful experience for all of us. And then you or someone said, well, how can we expand this for the entire fraternity? And that's when Men of Destiny was born. We started thinking about how do we workshop it? How do we create it for our guys? And then along the way, they blessed me with, we'd like to honor initiate you. And I'm like, really? Me? Okay, cool. So I'm a brother now and honor initiated. And I remember the day that happened. I had not experienced anything like that before. And it was emotional. It was profound. And I'm grateful.
So no undergraduate fraternity experience, only hearing about fraternity, probably like most people hear about fraternity.
And you can imagine what I had heard about fraternities.
Yes, absolutely. Right. And so sort of walk through, I've never had this conversation with you before, but I'm curious, walk through sort of how your mindset and talking with your wife about all of this, how your mindset shifted as you from the first time we met to the point that after your initiation.
Yeah. So all the stereotypes were in my head. At Pitt, I went to a couple of fraternity parties and did all the things that was stereotypical. And of course, then this is so, old hat, but I mean, there was the whole Animal House thing. And I mean, and it was about the time when I was in college. When did that come out? I don't know.
78.
So, okay. So that's me in college, right? So at any rate, that was my mindset. And then I meet you and your leaders. And it opened my eyes to a group of people who had a perspective about developing and encouraging young men in America that got my attention. And very purposeful organization. David Brooks would call it a second mountain organization. ATO is a second mountain organization that is deeply missional and purposeful. And I love that. And then I started to go to conferences. You invited me. And I remember the first national conference, I texted my wife and I said, these guys are cool. And these are, and then I got hyperbolic, and these are some of the finest young men I've ever met, and I still believe that. And a lot of it is, I picked up because you treat them like leaders and they act like leaders when you treat them like leaders. So yeah, my whole mindset changed, and now I'm just proud to be one of the guys.
So Men of Destiny is one piece of a program in which ATO is sort of leaning against, pressing into what Glazebrook would call the eternal and immutable principles of the fraternity. We're very clear that we welcome men of any faith or no faith at all. We're not a faith-based organization, but we also have our founding principles. And for men who want to explore those more, or who want to press into them more in their own faith, my philosophy has always been we need to be able to provide some kind of resource for that, for those men who choose to do that. And so many years ago, before Men of Encounter, we started, Men of Destiny, we started a program called Encounter, which is absolutely full-blown, let's explore your faith, let's press in to your faith. And we talk about things that Glazebrook certainly would have been comfortable talking about and excited talking about in Encounter. You went to Encounter actually before Men of Destiny. And so for just a sense of the audience, helping to understand from your perspective, and now as someone who has been to several and helped lead Encounter, what you see happening within that experience.
Yeah, well, the thing is, faith is a dimension of a whole person's life. Not everyone may share a faith system or a religion, And some people are spiritual. But a large portion of our guys, maybe the majority of our guys, have some sense of faith that's important to them. And we're an organization that believes in developing the whole man. And so to ignore the faith dimension is to not really help these guys develop themselves. So I'm appreciative of the fact that we do encounter, and I enjoy being a part of it and helping lead it. And what I see happening there is a couple of things stick out to me. One is Encounter has a strong identity component, really helping guys answer the question, what truth are you listening to about yourself and what lies are you listening to about yourself? It also has a very strong emphasis on who is God to you and how do you relate to God as Father, for instance. And we do that. It's not just a preaching symposium. Guys are not sitting there and getting taught the whole time. They're experiencing God and faith in ways that I think are unique and for our guys are not going to feel churchy. And maybe that's another reason why it's appealing to guys, because it doesn't feel churchy. So I think guys walk away with better sense of identity, better sense of who God is. And the third thing they walk away is, and look, I'm in a room full of brothers who are essentially doing this together, and that has a compounding effect, and our guys grow better in relationship with each other. So those are the things I see that I think are really important about Encounter.
Yeah, and so one of the reactions that's very consistent is guys who perhaps have grown up in the church come and say at the end of the 3.5-day experience, I thought this was going to be like another church camp or like another InterVarsity or one of those, and it wasn't.
Right.
It was very different and hit them in a way at a different angle, at a different way that impacted how they look at and practice their faith. We've also had men who have come in with no church experience whatsoever. And we have never had, and we've been doing this program since 2011, anyone run out of the room or leave saying, I felt like I was really, propagandized in issues of faith. And I think that speaks to the integrity of the program. Yeah,
we work hard not to have that happen. And we try to, not that church-based programs, InterVarsity, Crusade, Crew, those are wonderful things.
Yes,
don't get
absolutely.
me wrong. 40 years I led those kind of things. So, but this provides maybe this is an overused word, it's kind of a safe space for a person to explore their faith without pressure. And it's a space that is enough experience that is unique that it gets their attention. And they walk away with, at the very least, they walk away thinking more deeply about their faith.
Right, and I think we're seeing a lot of stories today, and the conversation about boys and young men in and out of ATO, certainly, who have grown up with not, in many cases, not a great male role model. In many cases where they're being told their normal masculinity is a problem. And so we're seeing men coming into college not knowing who they are, feeling guilty or shame for just being who they are when they talk about identity. And one of the pieces of Encounter is focusing on the story of the prodigal son. And you see I don't know if you want to call it relief or what the response is when, as Dave tells the story of the prodigal son, that the son didn't have to do anything to get back in the good graces of his father. And whether people in church or not in a church background have ever thought about it that way, the way that they hear it and Encounter, you can just see the weight lift off of these guys.
Yeah, well, religion inherently by its very nature is, people think it's rules-based. And some people approach religion that way. And when it's rules-based, then the big question is, what rules am I breaking? How guilty do I feel? And what do I need to know what do I need to do, or am I accepted even though I'm messed up? And that's what Encounter, we flip that script, because we're not flipping the script. That story, which was told by Jesus, was a made up story. It's not a real story. He made it up to flip the script on the way people understand the messed up nature of their life and how God sees them. And what they're surprised by is, wait a minute, this story, Jesus tells a story where God is essentially saying, I don't want to hear your apology. I just want you to come home. And that's mind-blowing to most people.
Yeah, so as someone who's been a leader in a church through seminary, dealt with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands probably over the years of people going through the church, how do you respond to the kind of reaction that we see with ATO undergraduates, and frankly, a lot of people that are older than undergraduates hearing that story the way that you just described it? How have they not heard or known that story in that way going through the church?
Well, I was that guy that was teaching that story for years, maybe differently. I mean, all along I've always been, to be honest with you, I think it's the greatest story ever told, that particular. And I say that to the guys that encounter. I think it's the most powerful story for the reasons I said. Who was that? A.W. Tozer said, the most important thing about you is what you think about God. That's why the story is important. So I'm sorry, your question was, when our guys react to it, how do I feel about the way our guys react to it?
Yeah, because the church, they have the men who've grown up in the church,
right,
clearly have never heard that story the way that it's told, which is the true way. I mean, it's the story is the story.
Yeah, that's the way it was. That was the reason why it was given. It was even the context in which it was given. When people said to Jesus, "Why do you eat with sinners?" Well, let's talk about sinners. Let me tell you the story. It is for some people, this maybe is a loaded term. I'm going to use it anyway. I think the story itself is the start of a detox, of a system that people grow up with. And I don't think pastors and spiritual leaders are intending to do this, but human beings tend to always see themselves through a how bad am I lens. And religion can really pile on. So watching guys detox and say, wait a minute, God doesn't see me. God sees me. His prime story to me is welcome home, and not you idiot. That takes some time to unpack that, and to some guys it's just an instant relief, and to other guys, and we've seen guys at Encounter who have no spiritual background, they're like, oh, wait, that's who God is, and it's a relief to them too. Like, I can buy into that. That's the reaction we get.
Sure. And some people would listen and are listening perhaps and saying, well, you're just saying God is anything goes and God's good with anything. But that's not really what that story is saying.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's the fact of the matter is, when Jesus told the story, he took great pains to describe what an idiot the young man was. He took great pains to describe how badly he acted towards his father and broke all the social rules and it's not, he doesn't overlook the sin, so to speak, but it is how God approaches the young man that is the epiphany. That's the, oh my word, this is who God is in the middle of my messed up life. That right there is the wonder.
Yeah, which connects with another really transformative part of Encounter, which is the identity statement, right? Mm-hmm. And describing who God says you are as a person versus who, if I had to write down who, what I'm hearing in my head, who I am, sort of full of either boastful kinds of things that really aren't true, or more likely, or more bullet points on the who I am, shameful things or things that I'm, known I'm not very good at, or I'm accused of doing, or those kinds of things, and helping guys understand that's not really your identity.
Yeah. Well, and I've referred to David Brooks, and we talk about him in Men of Destiny, but his book, The Second Mountain, is a really important book. And he describes the first mountain that everyone walks or tries to climb in their early life. The summit, what you're trying to do is just figure out who you are. It's a time of identity formation. So he suggests, and I agree with him, that most of our time is spent asking the question, who do you think I should be? Who am I compared to you? There's a lot of comparison going on. We come up with these checklists. Am I meeting the checklist? And our young undergrads, that's daily life for them, is trying to work out their identity. So what we offer as a fraternity then is two things. We offer Encounter, which dives deep into that question, and Men of Destiny, which dives deep into that question. And I would even say, who am I, is maybe the prime question of a young undergrad. And we help address that.
Yeah, especially today, more so probably even than 10 years ago. I mean, important 10 years ago for sure. People were still struggling with that. But today, it just seems like it's a point in time where this question, these issues of identity are really pointed in a college man's life.
Yeah, and I've told you this before. I'm just saying publicly what I've told you privately. And I think if there ever was a time for fraternities and our fraternity, ATO, to step up and say, we will never say this. Well, I don't think you would. We are in the man formation business or the identity formation business. That's at least an underscore of what we do. And now is the time I think, to seize that moment.
So you spent a lot of time with ATO undergraduates, with alumni, and as you sort of think forward in your engagement with ATO and what you bring, what's your hope as you sort of look forward for the men that are coming through this fraternity?
Well, in general, to see young men moving beyond their undergrad experience into the world, and I'm sorry, I'm beating the drum here again, with a better sense of who they are, coupled with what has always been an idea behind ATO, and that is I see myself as a leader in the world. And also what they pick up from Men of Destiny is not just a leader, but a transformer. I want to be a part. I remember the first time I met with the board, and I said, can you imagine a day when our undergrads walk in the world and wherever they step, things happen and the world is transformed? That's still my vision. That's still my dream. And honestly, I think we're seeing it happen with our young men, because if we as a fraternity continue to emphasize that.
Well, Dave, thank you for what you've brought to ATO and for your continued engagement with fraternity. There are hundreds, thousands of young men that have been impacted because of you and your contribution, as have I, as have this organization. So it's an exciting time. And I think ATO was in many ways certainly designed for the time in 1865 when Glazebrook founded it, and certainly for other eras. But I think the creed of the fraternity is more relevant today than it's ever been. I think the lessons taught in the initiation and the ritual are more relevant perhaps than they've ever been, and more needed by young men than they've ever been.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And let me just say how grateful I am to be brought into this community as a brother, and for the fraternity help me understand in a deeper way the concepts of love and respect, for which I'm grateful.
Great. Thanks, Dave.